Hi everyone, welcome back to my astrology channel. Today we're going to talk about Mars in your second house. All right, to understand that, let's first talk about what is Mars. Okay, so what is Mars? Mars is, you can take Mars as a commander of the universe. So if Sun is the king and Moon is the queen, then Mars is a commander of the universe. So Mars is raw action, it's a warrior. Mars is going to go and get that action done, get that job done via the action. Okay, it doesn't think about the consequences. It just likes to get the job done. So Mars is also courage. Mars is aggression. So if you have someone sitting, if you have Mars sitting in the first house, that person may be very aggressive. We're going to talk about more qualities of that, but I wanted you to understand what Mars is. All right. So it's a warrior, it's a commander, it's aggressive. It can get temperamental very easily. By it, the native who has this placement can get aggressive very easily, can get angered very easily. Then they don't know what they're doing with their actions when they get angry. Because commander's job, the warrior's job, is basically to go out there and do the war. They don't think who is getting killed, who's getting hurt, whose emotions are at line. So that's kind of like your Mars. Okay. And now let's talk about the three different aspects of Mars. Okay. To understand how and what Mars does on the house, we want to understand Mars and then the aspects. So Mars has three different aspects. First aspect is going to be on the fourth house from where Mars sits. The second aspect is going to be on the seventh house from where Mars sits. And the third aspect is going to be on the eighth house from where Mars sits. Why does Mars have the fourth aspect? Mars, because it's a warrior, and the fourth house in the Kalpurush Kundali is of the house of the home and the mother. So your homeland, your motherland. It's a house of happiness. So warriors are supposed to protect your homeland, your motherland. So Mars has that special aspect that no other planet has, the fourth aspect, to protect its motherland from where it's sitting. The second aspect is on the seventh house from where it's sitting. Every planet has a seventh aspect. And as I always say, it's kind of like give and take. You give and you get. So Mars by nature is a malefic. It's a natural malefic. So if you give that house malefic, you're going to get back malefic many folds. Just like I mentioned in my Jupiter videos, the seventh aspect, if you give it love, you get back love many folds. So that's kind of the seventh aspect because it's a straight up 100% aspect on it, drishti, because it's the house is right in front of you. You can't miss it. You're going to look at it. So the next aspect is the eighth house. Why do we have the eighth aspect? Why does Mars have it? Well, in the Kalpurush Kundali, Mars rules the first and the eighth house. So Mars has a special aspect of watching over his own house. Okay, so eighth house is Scorpio, but whatever sign it's placed, it doesn't matter when Mars is aspecting it because that's going to be the eighth aspect. No other planet has the eighth aspect. So Mars has the fourth and that eighth aspect separate from all the other planets. Jupiter has the 5, 7, 9. Mars has the 4, 7, and 8. Now the eighth aspect, what does Mars do over there? So eighth is his own house. What do you do when you look at your own house? You're going to try to kill off the enemies of that house. So for instance, let's say that eighth aspect ends up being on the fourth house. Now the fourth house is the house of happiness, as I just mentioned. Now Mars is going to want to kill the enemies of the happiness for that native. So that's good. It may seem not good while it's happening, but at the end of the day, that's what Mars' goal is. So now that you understood what Mars is, what are the aspects, let's go into what Mars does when it sits in your houses. Okay, let's talk about Mars in your second house. So what is house number second or house number 2? The second house is the house of your wealth, your bank account, how much money you have there, overall wealth of the individual. It is also your family that you're growing up in, that you grew up in. So, your parents, your grandparents, your uncles and aunts, perhaps you lived in a joint family, those kind of things. If you have 10 siblings, then all of that. It's a combined thing. It's called the family that you grew up in. It also represents your values, okay, the kind of values you got from your family when you were growing up. So maybe one of the values was, hey, always speak the truth, regardless of what happens. Always take care of people that are in need, regardless of what happens. So those are the kind of values that we're talking about. Your initial learning, basically. Also, as you're growing up, your speech as well. House second also represents your speech. It represents your mouth. So the food that you take in, okay? So that's also represented by it. And the way you talk, it also represents your speech. In terms of body parts, it represents your right eye as well. So those are the things that it represents. Now, if you have Mars sitting in your second house, what it does to an individual. Now, if it's a benefit for your horoscope, then it's going to give you, it may still give you some aspects because it's a natural malefic. So your speech can be harsh with your family in certain cases. You may have a tendency to eat bad food. It's going to take something, even if it's naturally, even if it's a benefit for your horoscope, okay? It's still going to give you some habit of it that's going to be malefic for you. So, for instance, you're eating too many fatty foods, the food, or maybe too much sweets, okay, that is going to impact you. So those are the things it's going to do. Maybe your speech is very harsh with your family. Perhaps your family's speech may be harsh with you, or maybe you're not getting good values, the kind of values that you would like to get. Maybe you haven't gotten those. So those kind of things. Now, if it's a malefic for your horoscope, now your speech is not going to be good with your family at all. And you can tell that, we can tell, we're happy to look at your horoscope to check for what's going on with it and help you out. But yes, if you have it as malefic, you're going to have very bad speech with your family. Your eating habits are going to be bad. If you end up opening a food industry restaurant, or if you end up with a hospitality restaurant or any kind of banking place, if it's malefic, you may see some losses there as well. You may not grow up in the best values, best traditions. You may not be learning all those things properly. So that's what happens when you have a malefic Mars in your first house. Now let's talk about the aspect of this Mars, okay? The first aspect, as you can see in the chart, is on house 5. What is house 5? House 5 is it's your children. House 5 is your love, your romances that you do throughout your life. It's also, house 5 is originally in the Kalpurush Kundali ruled by the sun. So it is in some way connected with royalty as well, with the government, things like that. Sports, you see sports from this house. You also see your past life good deeds from house 5. Your self-expression, how do you express yourself, is also seen from house 5. So when you have a Mars aspect on house 5, if it's a malefic aspect, even if it's a benefic aspect, it is still going to have some harshness there with your kids. If it's malefic, your relationship with your kids may suffer a great deal, perhaps due to your aggressive speech, okay? And you may get defamed in something or another, like I said, because it's also where the original Leo is, original sun Kundali is. So sun is related to fame, status, those kind of things. So you may see some some defame in your life if you have a very malefic Mars sitting in your second house. So watch out for that. Watch out for your speech. I would say that's kind of the best remedy for this Mars in your house 5. If you're dealing with your children, try to control yourself. Meditation is something that would really help you in this. That would really calm your mind. But speech is what you need to watch out for, especially with your family. Also, if you have a malefic one, definitely watch out. Watch out for what you're eating, what you're putting in your mouth, because that could really impact you as well. Because house number 5 is also your it's also in your body parts. It's above your belly button, so it's your stomach above your belly button. So maybe you're eating things that you're putting in your body that could affect areas above your belly button as well. So be careful on that. Now let's talk about the seventh aspect of Mars. That is going to be on your house 8. And as I mentioned in my other videos, house 8 is a house of transformation. It is a house of sudden loss. It is a house of sudden gain as well. It is a house of research, of depth, in-depth research, underground work. It is related to secrets as well. So, but a lot of this is connected to transformation. So again, what you put into that house is what you're going to get back from that house. It is also the house of your in-laws because it's a house next to house 7, second house from 7. House 7 is your spouse. So that's your in-laws. And you can also kind of call it wealth from your business too, house number 8. So that's what house 8 represents. Now, think about your in-laws, for example. If you give them love, you're going to get love back, right? So in this case, that in the case of Jupiter, if you give them love and you have an aspect of Jupiter, you get many folds love back. Here, if you give them not love, say your speech is aggressive with them, if it's malefic, it's going to be very bad for you coming back in return. You don't know what you're going to see. So that's the 8th aspect. And it usually the 8th house is related to transformation. So in this case, it's a 7th aspect. We'll get to the 8th aspect, but that's kind of the 7th aspect. It just happened to be on the 8th house in this side. Okay, next, when Mars is in your second house and it's aspecting house number 9, that's its 8th aspect. Now, house number 9, what is house 9? House 9 is your father. House 9 is your dharma, your religion. It could be what you consider to be dharmic. It could just be doing the right thing. That's dharma for you, or knowing that there's a higher power. That might be dharma for you. Whatever you consider to be dharma. It's also the house of spirituality. It is a house of higher studies. You say you decide to go get your PhD. It's higher studies. It's also the house of your long distance travel. It could be foreign travel, but long distance travels. Okay. It is also the house of your thighs as well, in terms of the body part of your thighs. And the previous one on house 8, that is the house of your, how you put food in from house 2, that's how you take food out from house 8. So it also represents those body parts. So you want to be careful of what you're eating in, because that is where the trouble is going to be coming out. So let's talk about back to house 9. That's the house of your father, dharma, higher education, spirituality, those kind of things, and also your thighs. Now, when Mars is placing its 8th aspect on your house 9, it wants you to transform through that. Okay, so that's going to be one of the houses that you will struggle. You will have the most struggle in that house. Perhaps you want to understand spirituality and you're just not able to. Perhaps you have the toughest relationship with your father. It's also gurus and teachers. Maybe there's a teacher in your life that's really tough for you, but you know what? In the end, that teacher is going to help you transform into a better person. Same thing with your father. Maybe your father, you have issues with your father, and that's like one of the most struggling aspect in your life. But you want to fix it, but it's very strugglesome. So if you go through with it, if you do the things that you believe are right, and they are right, you will transform over time. So that's your house 8th aspect on house 9. Now, if you have Mars sitting in your second house, and if you can relate to all of this, having issues with your father, perhaps with your teachers, gurus, things like that, or maybe your in-laws, or maybe your children, maybe due to your speech, maybe you have aggressive speech, or your family has aggressive speech, please write that down in the comments. I would love to hear from you. And as I always say, we do provide personal horoscope reading. So do reach out to us with the link in the video description, and we'd love to connect with you. And also, don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button, and hit the bell icon so you don't miss out on any future videos. And thank you for watching.